It took a long time, but summer's finally here in the lakes area, which means once again we got lots of tourists coming to town from the Fargo-Moorhead area, the Twin Cities, and of course elsewhere. And once again, that means the being on the lookout for aquatic invasive species by locals has started. But last year, there was a little bit of a tiff between a very well-known outdoors media figure here in the state of Minnesota and some people involved in our local aquatic invasive species check program. The incident occurred last year, I believe in June, up at Bad Medicine Lake, and Ron Schera was the person involved with it, who's famous for his program Minnesota Bound, which has aired on KARE 11 in the Twin Cities and other probably NBC affiliates across the state. Anyway, Mr. Schera was there to fish with a friend and had an altercation with somebody there that was checking boats. Basically, Mr. Schera and his friend didn't like the fact that their boat was being checked by this volunteer, and when they became somewhat huffy and puffy about it, they asked the volunteer about the lake checks and checking of the boats, and the volunteer said, well, the reason he cared so much is because this was his lake. And then Ron Schera went off and wrote an article in the Outdoor News, which basically kind of slammed the aquatic invasive species volunteer check program for him calling it his lake. Now, I don't want to get caught up on the his, this, my. Everybody knows that all the lakes in Minnesota belong to all the great people of Minnesota and even further and beyond. Just because you live in a lake doesn't mean you own the lake. Most people know that. Some people that belong to lake associations don't understand that. Just because you pay higher property taxes because you live on the lake doesn't mean there's no special account someplace that your higher property taxes go to take care of the lake. The county takes that money and puts it all in the same general fund like everything else. So even though you pay higher taxes, none of it goes for the lake. The lake really gets dealt with because of fishing licenses, boating licenses, and other types of licenses, etc. that everybody pays. So I digress. As we get back into this year's boating season and these checks begin again, we got to remember one thing. It's about attitude. It's about talking with people. Outside of Becker County, outside of Detroit Lakes, Alexandria, Fergus Falls, Park Rapids, Brainerd, Duluth, the lakes areas of Minnesota, this is not a very big issue. When I talk to people in other parts of the state and I say the term AIS, most of them don't know what AIS stands for. And then if I say aquatic invasive species, they begin to think of zebra mussel, Asian carp. It's something we're much more aware of here. So when people come to visit our area from someplace else, we have to be patient with them, even when they get rude to us, because they just don't understand yet. And if we push them away, they'll never be an ally to fight this. And I've been very disappointed by some people I've talked to in official positions and the DNR and other law enforcement agencies that already think this is a losing battle against aquatic invasive species, and have already almost thrown up their hands at least stopping the spread and saying we've got to concentrate on a cure. They could be right, but just because we can't prevent all crime doesn't mean we don't need law enforcement. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try. But as we check with different people, have the roadside checks, the AIS dogs, and everything else, even in Lakeview Township, they closed all the Lakeview public accesses, which is really more of a symbolic gesture than a practical gesture to stop the spread of AIS. As we do all this, our volunteers and our own residents need to remember it's about attitude and about being patient, because not everybody relies on the lakes for a living, so it's not as important to them, but it will be if we just help them understand and not push them away.